Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto here, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Table 19. And this film was starring Anna Kendrick and a few other supporting cast members making out Table 19, including Craig Robinson, Lisa Kudrow, Stephen Merchant, June Squibb, and Tony Revolori. And this was directed by Jeffrey Blitz, and this film was, I'm going to say it was interesting because based off of the trailers, it seems like a relatively light-hearted kind of goofy comedy. And actually, sitting through the film, that was half the movie. And I think what Blitz does with this film in terms of balancing dramatic and comedic points in the film and the actual tone was not very well done, and a lot of the emotional parts and dramatic parts were very jarring and just felt like they came out of nowhere. And honestly, if that's probably one of the biggest negatives I could come up with this film, but overall I had a pretty fun time with this film because first off, the pacing is done really well. It's very streamlined, to the point. This is only an hour and 27 minutes. It doesn't lag anywhere. And in terms of storytelling, besides the unevenness with the tone, there's certain aspects of how the story was put together and told that were interesting, including the beginning setup. So when you're getting to know all the characters, how they set that up was pretty fun. And there's also some moments of describing all the different tables at this particular wedding and everything. And I thought those aspects of the film were actually done pretty well. But in terms of some of the editing and how the film was put together, it was a bit shaky, and you can tell there were some moments that were some rough cuts of editing. And there was probably a fuller film beforehand, because an hour and 27 minutes is pretty short for a feature length film. And I feel like this film was condensed and streamlined at one point, and it was fine with how it wound up being, but it wasn't super great. In terms of how the film looked, it was cinematography was basically point and shoot. There wasn't anything special about that, so that really wasn't a standout of the film. But in terms of the writing, this was written by Jay and Mark Duplass, and the characters in general, the members of this Table 19, I thought were pretty interesting characters and an interesting bunch, and they had some fun chemistry between all of them. And I thought that them figuring how the real weird reasons why they were all invited to this wedding and how things worked out, I think was pretty cool, and them developing relationships, and all those characters worked pretty well together. There's some obvious standouts. In terms of some of the and basically the story, the fun parts of this story that I really liked and got a lot of laughs at were that those awkward moments about being at a wedding when you're not like one of the super important people at the wedding, you're just kind of there and you're stuck at this table with a whole bunch of strangers, and fun, interesting things happen as a result of that. And the awkwardness of Eloise, Anna Kendrick's character, being the former maid of honor and now the ex of the bride's brother. That kind of interaction was very interesting and brought on some humor. But in terms of whenever it tried to hit dramatic points between, say, some of the reasons why Eloise and the brother played by Wyatt Russell, why they weren't together anymore, those moments were a little weird and uncomfortable and jarring, how they all came about, and like some of the marriage issues between Craig Robinson and Lisa Kudrow. And honestly, whenever it tried to get too deep and dramatic instead of sticking to this goofball awkward comedy, I think that's where the film kind of lacked quality when it came to the actual story. If it would have focused more on what it was doing well, I think this would have been a much better film. And in terms of performances, honestly, everyone at Table 19 were actually really good. Anna Kendrick does a fantastic job of being Anna Kendrick and being that quirky but endearing character. June Squibb really stands out as the former nanny. Craig Robinson has his moments. Stephen Merchant actually steals a lot of scenes with his awkward comedy that he does, which was absolutely perfect for what this film was trying to go for. Lisa Kudrow was probably the least memorable out of the people at the table. And in terms of Wyatt Russell, who was the other big character in the film, he was didn't really do well with the performance of what he was supposed to be in terms of character in the first half of the film. As things came out about his character, I think he settled in more to that awkward kind of goofball kind of role, but when he was trying to be like a jerk and a douchey kind of character, it really didn't fit him well and it just didn't match up. And so he was a little hit or miss in this film. In terms of the music wasn't super memorable, but and then I mentioned there was some choppy editing. My final thoughts on this film really are, for the comedy, I actually laughed at quite a bit and had a lot of fun with that. But whenever this film tried to scrape below the surface and really hit deep personal and human themes, besides the one theme that they did very well was dealing with social awkwardness of being at a wedding and finding some camaraderie with other people that are in those awkward situations. Everything else really fell flat. Overall, this film wouldn't say it was a good film, it wasn't really a bad film. Overall, I'm going to give Table 19 a C minus.